All right, you see that right there? When that happens, you've done had a bad day. Now, more often than not, it's because of a mechanical issue that happened on your bike. It wasn't an engineering flaw. It wasn't, something in the design that the manufacturer did wrong. It's because, for whatever reason, you had a mechanical failure on that bike. And typically, when I did the insurance jobs, when I worked for the dealership, that came in and this was what happened, more often than not, the number one was the front wheel bearing went out. Now, when wheel bearings go out, or bearings period, it can happen inside your engine or whatever. This is how it happens. They start to brittle for whatever reason. Either they're too tight, they rust, whatever the case is, they start to brittle. And then the brittling turns into spawn. And when the spawn starts to happen, it becomes real rapid, the bearing just comes apart. And the thing is, when you're doing 80 miles an hour down the road and the bearing starts to come apart, you notice it, but it's just for a second, and then this right here happens. And the key to preventing this from happening is two things. Number one, check your bearings. And every time you change that tire, and typically you're going to be changing that tire around 5,000 to 6,000 miles, check your bearings. You want to check your end play, and it needs to be, I always shoot for 2,000s, but it needs to be between 2,000 and 6,000 on the Timken bearings, and the sealed bearings are going to be 2,000. The other thing you want to do is check neck follow-away. Now, 90% of the insurance claims that came into the dealership that we repaired and vehicle instability happened, which caused the accident, it was because of the wheel bearing, and typically it was the right wheel bearing. And I'll tell you, what happens is when you're pressure washing your bike, more often than not, we all do it. We want them wheels to bling, and so we're sitting there trying to, pressure wash all the grit and grime off them hubs, and you end up forcing water inside past the seal. Keep in mind, it's just a lip seal. It's not designed to handle pressure. It's designed to handle just the escape of the oil or grease from outside to keep it contained. And so when you put that pressure washer down there and you hit it, then it gets water and that bearing starts to, even though it has grease, that bearing will still start to corrode, and then you have that issue right there. And like I said, typically it's leaning on the kickstand and you're being more aggressive, hitting that hub with the pressure washer on the right hand side than you are the left. But don't get me wrong, I've seen some where the left came apart, but most of the time it's because of corrosion on the bearing when it comes apart. The other thing that can happen is the bearing is set up too tight. You had somebody change the wheel, or they changed the hub, or they changed out the bearings. So, they discovered that the bearing was starting to go out. They put new bearings in there, and the end play was set up too tight. When it's too tight, it's pushing all the grease away from the rollers in the race, and it starts to heat up, and then it starts to spawn and come apart. Now, the other thing that's going to have happen is the neck fall away. I mean, it needs to be set right. You see me here, I'm sitting there setting the neck fall away correctly. It needs to be done every 10,000 miles. It needs to be checked every 5,000. It'll take 5 seconds to check it. And if you have to make an adjustment, it's quick and easy to do. Now, recently when I was changing my, putting the front tire on the Dyna before I went to Memphis in May, or getting ready to go to Memphis in May, I checked my bearing, I checked my end plane, and it was really too tight. And then I checked my bearing and I could feel some roughness. And so I pulled it off, and as you can see, the Timken bearing on it, you see the roller, it's starting to come apart. So it was real, if I hadn't checked that and I just slapped the tire on there, put the wheel back on, I would have been the guy on the death wobble sliding down the highway, me or my old lady or whatever, So that's why, it's real critical to double check this stuff and to make sure everything's right on your bike, to follow the service manual and set everything within spec. You do that, the death wobble is not going to happen. I've rode, on my bikes alone, I've got, I don't know, shoot, 250,000 miles just on just on my Heritage and my Dyna put together. Then all the test rides that I rode on thousands of bikes when I worked for the dealership. You add several more thousands of miles on them, and then the other bikes that I've owned through the years. So you figure I'm pushing close to 500,000 miles, and I have never once had any kind of wiggling on my bike, other than on occasion when you're really hammered down, you're doing 90 and you hit some groove spot in the pavement. It's going to cause the bike to wiggle, but the gyro rotor effects are going to stabilize it. It's going to put it back the way it's supposed to be. So anyway, I'm going to go out there and finish putting that bearing in. I'm in here. I'll see you on the next video.